Ring-a-ring-a roses, pockets full of posies. One by one they all fall down, never to rise in this lonely town. Sarah's breath formed a ghostly mist as she stood before the old house on Elm Street. It towered above her, its windows like unblinking eyes, and its walls groaning under the weight of untold stories. Seeking solitude after the chaos of city life, she found herself drawn to its eerie charm. As she pushed open the heavy front door, a symphony of creaks welcomed her into the dimly lit foyer. The air was thick with silence, a silence that seemed to whisper secrets of the past. Sarah's footsteps echoed across the hardwood floors as she wandered through the rooms. Each space was draped in shadows that danced just beyond her reach, as if playing a game only they understood. The house was a time capsule of faded beauty. Wallpaper curled in elegant decay, while antique fixtures held on to the last glimmer of a bygone era. As Sarah traced her fingers along the banister leading upstairs, she swore she heard a faint giggle from the darkness above. Shaking off her unease, she told herself it was just the old house settling. In the basement, amidst spider webs and dust-covered furniture, Sarah found it. A small, locked door set into the wall. The cold metal of the doorknob bit into her palm as she tested it. The door didn't budge, but Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine, a feeling that begged her to leave it alone. As day turned to night, shadows grew bold and stretched across the walls like ink spilled over parchment. Sarah lit candles to keep the darkness at bay, but their flickering flames cast unsettling shapes that seemed almost alive. It was then when she first heard it, whispers so soft that they were almost lost beneath the crackling of firewood. "Sarah," they seemed to call, a voice like wind through dead leaves. "No," she whispered back, pressing her hands to her ears. "Houses don't talk." Later that evening, as Sarah sat wrapped in a threadbare quilt with a book unread in her lap, there came a knock at her door. An old neighbor stood on her porch. His eyes held a sorrow so deep it looked like they might drown in it. With trembling lips, he offered only fragmented warnings. "The past pain of the house," he said, "never truly left. Trouble clings to these walls," he muttered before turning away, leaving Sarah with nothing but the echo of his words and a heart that thrummed uneasily in her chest. Up in the attic, where dust motes danced like tiny ghosts on sunbeams that struggled through dirty windows, Sarah discovered an old diary. Its pages, yellowed with age, told stories of a young boy's whispering friend who lived within these very walls. Her pulse quickened as she read each word, feeling an invisible gaze upon her neck. That night, as Sarah laid in bed, trying to convince herself that she was alone and safe, a faint creak echoed through the silence of the house. Down in the basement, where darkness reigned supreme and memories lingered like cobwebs, the small locked door groaned open without a touch, a silent invitation into an abyss yet unseen. And somewhere in the depths of that whispering silence, something ancient and hungry began to stir. Ring-a-ring-a roses, a pocket full of posies, a tissue, a tissue! We all fall down. Except, in the hush of Elm Street's forgotten manor, no one heard the sneezes nor saw the falls. Here, only silence held sway, a silence so heavy it seemed to suffocate the very air. Tom's footsteps clacked against the wooden floorboards as he hesitantly crossed the threshold into Sarah's new abode. His eyes flickered, not with the warm spark of a welcome guest, but with a jittery unease that clung to him like a second skin. Sarah noticed, her brow furrowed with concern as she studied her friend's paled features. "What is it, Tom?" she asked, her voice echoing slightly more than it should in the sparse hall. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Tom chuckled, a hollow sound, and glanced over his shoulder as if expecting some specter from a bygone era to materialize. "No, nothing like that," he replied, but his gaze told a different story. It lingered on the shadows that seemed too thick for the afternoon light, and on corners where dust danced with more vigor than what was natural. Together, they sat in Sarah's new yet ancient living room, the furniture creaking under their weight, as if unaccustomed to human presence. "Let's look up this place," suggested Tom, finally tearing his gaze from the unsettling corners. "The library, local history and all that. It's worth a shot." With a nod that signaled more resolve than she felt, Sarah agreed. They needed answers, and perhaps dusty archives held them tight in yellowed paper fists. The library was an edifice of knowledge, its roof vaulted like an old cathedral's, and its shelves standing solemn like silent sentinels of history. Their search led them through cobwebbed corridors of records to a small room lit by a dim bulb that flickered as if in protest. Tom's fingers brushed over cracked leather spines and faded titles until they unearthed newspaper clippings brittle with age. Each headline was bleaker than the last. Family vanishes without trace. Unexplained illness afflicts Elm Street home. Local child missing. Search continues. As Sarah sifted through these tales of woe, her hand froze upon finding the drawing, a crayon depiction of an entity vast and shadowy, towering over tiny figures with featureless faces. Children. The crude strokes conveyed an innocence lost and an understanding far beyond its creator's years. Sarah's heart thumped against her chest. Her breaths came sharp and quick. She couldn't tear her eyes away from it. The monster from a child's nightmare had bled its terror onto paper. Meanwhile, Tom's confession trickled into the dense air between them. His words seemed to carve themselves into the wooden table. "My sister," he began, voice barely above a whisper. "She loved this house, until she didn't." His eyes clouded with memories best forgotten. One day she vanished. Sarah reached across the table, her fingers brushing against Tom's hand, a lifeline amidst a sea of sorrow and regret. It was later when they returned to Sarah's home that evening that peculiarities became pronounced. Their shadows stretched too long across the walls, and door hinges moaned like souls in torment as they closed against the encroaching night. When they pressed play on the old tape recorder, they found in an attic box, expecting silence or at most static, their blood ran cold. A child's voice, clear but quivering with fear, pleaded in desperation before being swallowed by a sudden silence so absolute it seemed an entity unto itself. "We need to help them," Sarah murmured, though uncertainty played at the edges of her words. "Yes," Tom agreed with a solemn nod, "we have to." But as they exchanged these vows of rescue and redemption, somewhere within the house's bones, a chill not born of natural cold whispered among cobwebs and hidden spaces, an unseen watcher biding its time with eternal patience. Chapter 3. The Shape in the Glass. Mirror, mirror on the wall, don't show me things that creep and crawl. This twist on a familiar line sent a shiver down Sarah's spine as Tom's voice, hesitant and thick with unshed emotion, began to unravel his story in the dimly lit living room. Tom recounted the sorrow that once gripped his family. His little sister vanished without a trace, her laughter replaced by an oppressive silence that swallowed the house whole. His parents had searched tirelessly, but the house seemed to swallow every clue, every hope, leaving nothing but an echoing void. They moved away, but the shadow of the house on Elm Street clung to them like a relentless specter. Sarah listened intently, her own unease reflected in the glass of water she held, her fingertips brushing against the cold surface. She understood now. The whispering silence wasn't just an absence of noise. It was a presence, something waiting in the stillness. Their bond over shared fears solidified as they set out to confront the house's mysteries together. Their exploration led them to a patch of wall that felt unnaturally cold to the touch. Upon closer examination, they found the outline of a door hidden beneath layers of faded wallpaper, depicting cheerful scenes at odds with reality. With bated breath and shaking hands, they peeled away the deceitful paper to reveal a door that should not exist. The secret room beyond was a small, claustrophobic space, its air stale and heavy with dread. The walls were scratched, bearing desperate marks that told tales of terror without words. In this tomb-like chamber, darkness seemed to press against their skin, an almost palpable force. They were not alone. In the faint glow of their flashlights, shadows danced with malevolent joy. The entity from the child's drawing they'd found earlier was no longer confined to crumpled paper. It manifested in reflections on old photographs and window panes. The sight of it made Sarah's heart race with fear as it twisted and turned in unnatural angles, always just out of direct sight but very much felt. That night, after Tom had left with promises to return in the morning, Sarah's sleep was a fitful journey through nightmares. She saw herself reflected in countless mirrors around the house, each reflection beckoning her towards some unfathomable end. The entity's whispers were there too. Only in dreams did it reveal its hunger, an ancient craving rooted deep within the bones of the old house. The following day brought no comfort. Messages began to appear across Sarah's electronic devices, texts with no sender, computer screens flickering with invitations to join and embrace. Each message left her skin crawling as if touched by ghostly fingers. By evening, Sarah stood before her bathroom mirror, now a portal for fear, studying her reflection closely. New marks adorned her body, bruises in the shape of hands that seemed to reach out from beyond. She touched them tentatively. They were tender reminders of an unfathomable touch that marred both flesh and mind. The voice from her nightmare echoed again, a promise or a threat. "Join us," it said. And in that moment, Sarah knew she was being pulled into something far deeper than mere walls could contain. Ring around the rosy, pockets full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. The familiar tune twisted into a sinister melody as the wind whispered it through the corridors of the old house on Elm Street. Sarah shivered, though she couldn't tell if it was from the draft or the growing sense of unease that clung to her like the cobwebs festooning the neglected corners of her new abode. The once grand residence now seemed to consume light, its walls gnawing at the weak rays of sunshine that dared penetrate its gloom. It was in this dimness that Sarah's world began to unravel. Objects betrayed their inanimate nature, dancing a macabre waltz that defied reason. Books flung themselves from shelves with violent intent. Chairs scraped across the floor, screeching as if in protest of some unseen burden. Each incident crescendoed into a symphony of chaos as Sarah watched, heart-pounding, unable to scream or flee. It was during one such eerie performance that Tom's absence became palpable. Promises of vital information hung in the air like a noxious perfume, yet he had vanished as thoroughly as if swallowed by the house itself. Sarah's calls for him were drowned out by the cacophony of supernatural disturbances. Her voice seemed feeble and lost amidst the turmoil. The skies conspired with the house, birthing a storm so violent it seemed apocalyptic. Trees bent their backs in submission to the howling gales. Rain battered against windows with the fervency of a desperate phantom begging for entry. Sarah felt trapped, a lone ship in an angry sea where escape was merely a fool's dream. In this tempest's brief respites, when lightning slashed at the heavens and illuminated her prison, Sarah spied ghostly apparitions. Children, eyes hollow, mouths agape in silent screams, flickered in and out of existence with each flash. Their warnings came in whispers carried by the storm. "Do not listen," they breathed. "Do not see." Desperation led Sarah to Tom's notes, scribbles and sketches that spoke of rituals and bindings. With trembling hands, she gathered what meager materials she could find. Salt spilled upon hardwood floors like grains of hope. Candles flickered to life, casting ominous shadows that writhed on walls, desperate to escape their waxy prisons. Symbols drawn in haste promised protection or doom. As Sarah began her incantations, a ritual born of fear more than understanding, the house groaned its disapproval. Words faltered on her lips as dread enveloped her, thick and suffocating like a shroud. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with an ancient hunger, yearning for something Sarah could not comprehend. Her voice was barely audible over the maelstrom when she reached the climax of her desperate plea for salvation. Suddenly, an unseen maw yawned within the very fabric of the house, pulling her into its gaping void with an eagerness that spoke of starvation long endured. When dawn's light finally cut through the tempest's remnants like a blade through shadow, it found an eerie calm had settled upon Elm Street. Of Sarah and her struggles against forces beyond understanding, no trace remained. The house stood silent once more, insatiable appetite concealed beneath a veneer of faded beauty. And as another family paused beside the for sale sign planted in untamed grasses, drawn by a price too good to be true, their laughter filled with innocent curiosity, they remained blissfully unaware of whispers that beckoned them inside. "Come find us," they hissed softly through rustling leaves. "Join us." Sarah's story was left unfinished, a tale suspended between realms where endings are never happy and friendships never endure.
Thank you all so much for lending your ears to the chilling tale of Whispers in the Walls. I hope the journey through the dark corridors of Sarah's house on Elm Street has left you with goosebumps and a thrill that lingers in the silence around you. If you enjoyed being ensnared in the web of whispers and shadowy companions, please give this video a like. It's the simplest way to let me know that you appreciate these haunting stories. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon. There are many more tales from beyond the veil waiting for you, and you wouldn't want to miss what lurks in the shadows, just out of sight. Remember, each like, subscription, and share helps ensure that our community of horror enthusiasts continues to grow, bringing together all those who revel in the eerie quiet before the storm of screams. Who knows what mysteries we'll uncover next time? Until then, keep listening to those whispers in the walls. After all, they might be trying to tell you something. Stay spooky, dear listeners.